The federal Department of Education has a budget of about $280 billion a year. Less than 25% goes to educating our students.
Trump is letting Elon Musk steal our children's futures.
We are the NEA!
They had 400 teachers who were inappropriate, touched kids inappropriately or did things with kids. They couldn't fire them.
Consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education, which is sending the libs into a spiral.
These folks don't want to be involved in politics. They want to teach kids. They chose this profession because it's what they love. And now they've been thrown into the middle of this absolutely ridiculous fight. And it will go just as well as the tariffs have gone, just as well as the stock market's going, just as well as egg prices have gone. But this time it's our kids. Look, let's just name it what it is. The president has no idea how education works.
So in this video, we are going to go through all of this. We're going to discuss how America went from being the gold standard of education around the world to being ranked 39th internationally, what the Department of Education is, the history of the institution, and also a little bit about the education system in general, and why I think that it's not only that change is necessary, but that radical change is actually inevitable. We'll also go through Trump's reasoning as to why he wants to abolish this and get some reactions from around the web. Before we get there, guys, don't forget to smash that like button on the way in, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So first of all, what is the Department of Education? The US Department of Education, or the DOE, was created in 1980 under President Jimmy Carter to centralize federal education policy and ensure equal access to education. Its goal was to improve educational standards, address disparities, and manage federal funding for schools. And whilst they say they wanted to improve educational standards, the numbers kind of show a different story. You guys know I love a chart, and this chart actually tells you a lot. As you guys can see here, around the 1979-1980 mark is when the Department of Education is created, and the total costs just absolutely skyrocket, and the employees absolutely skyrocket, and the educational standards stay the same, or in many cases just go down. So I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars towards skyrocketing illiteracy doesn't seem like the best deal to me.
Is the Doge program targeted at these bureaucrats?
Yes.
And so what can you expect?
Well, let's look at the Department of Education. The federal Department of Education has a budget of about $280 billion a year. Less than 25% goes to educating our students. So where does the other $220 billion go? It goes to a bureaucracy. It goes to a consultant, and that consultant then donates money back to the Democrats, and then it goes to a different consultant, and then it goes to an NGO. I mean, it is money laundering and money churning at its absolute best, and you can look at almost every single agency and you will find it. So the brilliance of Doge isn't that he's going in and cutting spending. He doesn't have the authority to do that. We're the ones that have the authority to do that. What I want him to do is come up with a report, go through agency by agency by agency, identify every single program that we should not be funding, put a number attached to it. We slap a preamble on the front of that report, and we say that every single agency is having their budget cut by X amount as shown in the attached report, and none of those programs can go forward from here on.
Furthermore, one thing we know for certain is that if Elizabeth Warren comes out against it, then you know you're really hovering above the target.
This is a code red, shout it from the rooftops moment. Trump is letting Elon Musk steal our children's futures. He's trying to shut down an agency that funds after-school programs, an agency that helps millions of kids get the financial aid they need when they go to college, an agency that enforces our civil rights laws that protect our students. So if you're a student or if you're a public school teacher, Trump is sending a message loud and clear. He doesn't care about you, and he doesn't care about your family. This is just another part of Elon Musk and Donald Trump's playbook to dismantle public education in America. We have to stop them.
So guys, I have to be fair here, and besides Elizabeth Warren, there actually have been some very strong counterpoints to this argument.
Depending on us to win all the things. NEA, we have to win all the things, all the things, all the things. Our colleagues are depending on us to win all the things. Keep going, NEA. To preserve our democracy, we must win all the things. delegates, we won't go back. We will keep going forward because we are the NEA. We are the NEA. We are the NEA.
So pretty compelling stuff there. I mean, all the things, win all the things. But what are the details of why Trump wants to get rid of this, and what exactly is his plan?
They're not doing a good job. And if you take a look at our education process, and if you look at the charts, because they have numerous charts where they do the top 40, we're at number 37, 38, 39, and 40. And recently they hit, during Biden's last few days, they hit last. So they were number 40, and yet we're number 1 in cost per pupil. So it's pretty bad. But we have a dream. And you know what the dream is? We're going to move the Department of Education. We're going to move education into the states, so that the states, instead of bureaucrats working in Washington, so that the states can run education.
So diving into this more, there's a few layers to it. He wants to decentralize control and return power to local communities so that education can be managed locally rather than federally, which is actually how the US is meant to be run, with powers like education being vested in the state and not federally. And the Department of Education is obviously a federal institution and has a one-size-fits-all approach. And this doesn't account for regional differences, so the idea is that giving the different stakeholders more power and more say will provide for better educational outcomes. But these Karens don't seem too happy about it. Check this out.
Equally pernicious, they're saying, oh, don't worry, let's block grant it. So we'll give it to a state education department. Right. So, and then let the state education department decide what to do. So we know, for example, what Texas would do.
Right.
They'll use it for vouchers. So they won't give it to the kids who have it now. They'll just give it for vouchers.
Catholic schools, religious schools.
God forbid any funding goes to the Christian schools in Texas, guys. I mean, if they can't control it from the top down, then how will they be able to jam LGBTQ propaganda into the curriculum? So moreover, guys, there's also a lot of waste that needs to be cut. And we saw the chart before, and Trump sees this organization as a bloated and inefficient bureaucracy that is just squandering taxpayer dollars. So the argument is that federal spending on education should be more allocated to the classrooms and to education initiatives rather than consumed by big administrative bureaucracies. Or in other words, middle-aged cat ladies like this.
It's time to speak up. I'm standing outside of the Department of Education building in Washington, D.C. There are reporters lined up across the street because the Trump administration has issued an order that all employees are to vacate this building by 6 o'clock tonight and that it will be closed tomorrow. And we know that massive cuts and layoffs are coming to the Department of Education. Now, if you haven't read Project 2025, you might not know that eliminating the Department of Education was one of their top goals. They want to eliminate the Department of Education, and they want to cut any and all funding that they can to the states for their education. And why is that? Because an uneducated populace is easier to control. The Trump administration and the Christian nationalists don't want an educated populace. All they want are people who will be slave labor to the billionaires who are going to run the show. They don't want us to know how to read and write and to have critical thinking because an uneducated populace is easier to control. Go out there and love your neighbor.
An uneducated populace is easy to control, she says. The irony of her making that statement is actually hilarious. In 2024, according to the National Literacy Institute, 21% of adults in America are illiterate and 54% of adults read below a 6th grade level. According to the World Population Review, they rank 36th in global literacy rates. A bit suspicious that North Korea is number 3 with 100%. But hey, I guess you got to take them at their word. 1/3 of 8th graders in the US are functionally illiterate, according to the NAEP. So, safe to say that there is a big problem here. Let's not forget also the detrimental effect that social media is having on young people. I mean, you guys have probably heard of the notion of TikTok brain. When you speak to young people these days and they can't concentrate on anything for more than 6 seconds because they're just watching TikTok all day, and their dopamine receptors are constantly just fried, and they don't actually have the ability to delve into anything thoughtful. And also AI. I mean, you can't imagine the effect that this is already having. These kids get their hand on ChatGPT, and I mean, guys, if I had ChatGPT in high school, I would have used it for absolutely everything, and I would have retained absolutely nothing. I didn't retain that much anyway, but I would have retained less. So, I mean, how does the developed world, and particularly in the case of this video, the United States, contend with this literacy crisis that's happening? Well, many people are moving to homeschooling. They're keeping their kids out of the failing public education system. Some people think that we just need better teachers and that this needs to be incentivized and bad teachers need to be fired. And then other people think that you should just throw money at it. And in regards to the teachers, Rand Paul has a very interesting take on this from all the way back in 2014.
I think there are teachers who are like professional football players. You know, there's 1,000 professional football players. They're extraordinary. There's probably 10,000 extraordinary teachers. Let's find those teachers, put them on the internet, and have them teaching most of our kids. I'm not saying get rid of the teacher in the classroom, but if there's someone like the guy on, the guy in Khan Academy is like an ex-business guy. He's not even a teacher, but he has an extraordinary ability to explain complex problems. I was on there the other day and watching him do little drawings and explain the Doppler effect. It was better than anything I'd ever had in school. And I was like, gosh, this guy needs to be teaching the Doppler effect for everybody. And that's what should happen, is extraordinary teachers should be filmed and broadcast in every class, colleges too. I mean, there's so much information and ability to transmit it that we need to allow for innovation and not just be stuck in the old model. But the old model is because people don't want to allow anybody to get involved with the system. And I'll give you an example. John Stossel did this thing on education a couple years ago, and they had 400 teachers who were inappropriate, touched kids inappropriately or did things with kids that made them, or they couldn't teach anymore. They couldn't fire them. They had them in a building in New York City, and they just were there day after day being paid, but nobody could fire them because the contract was 14 pages. The union you couldn't even fire a pedophile. So I mean, that's a problem. I would pay some teachers more, but I would pay some less, and I would fire some. But you need to allow that kind of structure to occur where the one that's on there with their feet on the desk reading the newspaper and doesn't do squat for the kids needs to be out the door.
But you're a senator thinking of running for president of the United States, and you don't think the federal government should have any role in any of this?
I think
not
that
in terms of providing resources or
education historically was a state and local subject, and I think that what we've seen is, since we spend about $100 billion in the Department of Education each year, and that's been going on since 1980. I'm not sure we're better off than we were before. See, the one thing that
you
could probably help
propose a budget that would eliminate most of that, right?
Well, what I would do is I would have it spent at the state and local level. I wouldn't take it up there at all. I'd leave it at home. So you'd spend the money. You might still spend it in your state government, but education, even now, 95% of your education dollars are state and local. That $100 billion gets swirled around in a big bureaucracy up there. They send rules down that don't help education. They hinder innovation. I would cut them out of the loop. I don't think you'd notice if the whole department were gone tomorrow.
So even though this was 10 years ago, I do think that this really rings true still. I mean, the reform of the education system and cutting waste, fraud, and abuse is one thing. But actually, I think that the education system as we know it is going to become completely obsolete over the next decade or so as technology continues to advance. So a huge change seems inevitable, and it will likely bring about a lot more decentralization than even what Trump is proposing. And the LGBTQ propaganda in schools and the rise of people who are homeschooling, it to me seems like a good indication that people are kind of waking up to the actual nature of the education system and what that is and why it's actually very inefficient. This is an education system that was designed by the Prussians to create obedient worker slaves for a factory or industrial economy, which we don't nearly have to the same extent.
I did some investigation into the derivation of the North American, European, for that matter, public education system, and found out that it was based on the Prussian model. Mm-hmm. And the Prussians produced a universal education system in the late 1800s because they were afraid they were losing military superiority, and they wanted to produce a cadre of mindless, obedient soldiers. Mm-hmm. That was expressly the purpose. And then that model was adopted by prototypical fascists in the US, again in the late 1800s. This is before Mussolini and all of that time. corporate types mostly who wanted to produce cadres of obedient workers. And that's why the desks are in rows, and that's why there's factory bells, and that's why it's top-down leadership. But what was really stunning about that wasn't only that that was the model, but it's worse than that, because the people who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system because they wanted them to be obedient. Now,
so guys, a little bit of an autistic video today, went in a lot of different directions, so probably best to leave it at that. Let me know what you guys thought. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know it below. Don't forget to smash that like button if you did. Subscribe to the channel. And also, guys, if you want to watch another video, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.